This is Austin Liti Limits, where authors talk to authors about books and the craft of storytelling. Sponsored by Blue Ink Review, because typing the end is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com. Ramona Reeves grew up in Mobile, Alabama, with a passion for writing, and she enjoys sketching art. She spent 10 years in New York writing freelance articles, worked for a newspaper in Texas, and received her MFA in fiction at New Mexico State. Her collection of short stories, It Falls Gently All Around, won the 2022 Drew Hines Literature Prize and the Texas Institute of Letters Award for Best First Book of Fiction. And she talks with our Scott Semigrin.
So please welcome to the show, Ramona Reeves.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to come on. I'm really excited.
Excellent, sure. So I've finished reading your excellent collection, It Falls Gently All Around. So this collection features two protagonists mostly, Babby and Donnie, and it almost reads like a novel. Did the collection start off as like this was going to be a cohesive thing about these two, or were these disparate stories that over time you're like, oh, I think I can pull these all together into a collection?
They always started out as a linked collection. I mean, initially, I'll say I was thinking they would be a novel told in stories, but when I actually tried to sell it that way, agents said no. This is a short story collection. So and actually wanted me to link them more, I guess, more propulsively, the way novels are, or more in the forward progress that novels often go. And the stories, I think, in some ways do read like a novel, but they also meander a bit. And I was really trying to explore community somewhat in the collection, and so I really wanted to leave the structure the way it was. So yeah, I settled on a linked short story collection. And took a long time to write because I didn't really know I didn't really know how to write such a thing when I started. So I had to learn a lot, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read recently that novels and story, I mean, it's all semantics, right? So novels and
Yeah,
stories is like this title that I guess is looked down upon. Although I've written a novel and stories, I like the format,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what do you think makes it different by calling it a collection compared to a novel and stories, or is it really just a novel and stories?
I mean, I guess it's up to a reader to decide what they think that it is ultimately, but I kind of settled on a linked short story collection only because although to me there is a sort of propulsive ending in a way, because it does meander through these peripheral characters and go some places maybe that the readers wouldn't expect. I settled on that, but yeah, it is semantics, and who knows?
Right. So what is it? So it takes place in Mobile, Alabama, which I'm familiar with. I had mentioned to you before that I didn't grow up, but I spent some time in Alabama as a kid. My dad was in the military. What is it about Mobile that really sparked, this interest in having it as a setting for this particular book?
Um, well, first I'll say right before I started this book, I read Olive Kitteridge, which takes place in Maine, and then Winesburg, Ohio. And both of those books made me think, oh, what if I could, lay some of this, do some of the same sorts of things they're trying to do in Mobile, as a way to talk about community and class and the history and just all of it. You know, what would that look like? So that's really where it started.
Excellent. So you employ some great metaphors in this book. I'd like to read one. It really made me laugh out loud. I know people say that they laugh out loud, but it did make me laugh out loud when I read this. So in talking about Donnie, I believe, you wrote, his wives were socks and briefs that belonged in separate drawers, and he intended to keep them that way. And I just thought this was really funny because as a man, I can visualize this, but it also lands as just a funny visual, just in general, like sorting his wives in this particular way. So can you talk about um, metaphors and how easily do they come to you? Do they come up in the initial drafting, or is this something that when you go back and you're kind of like nailing away at the revisions that they come out that way?
Um, yeah, they do come up a lot for me in drafting. And in fact, I have to kind of dial them back. It's just sort of a natural, I guess, inclination of the way I write. But yeah, and then sometimes in revision they'll show up. Yeah, I'm thinking about there was one in a story with a character named Faye who owns a truck stop where all the characters have worked. And there's a moment that there's a metaphor where she talks about falling into a hole, and you know the idea around that not being able to get out each time, getting out of that hole being a little bit more difficult and so on. So it varies, but I think it's something that just comes up naturally.
Right. So for me, metaphors and similes typically come out in revision. It's always something that I just seem to forget to do when I'm initially drafting a story. So in talking about process, are there things that you realize that you forget in initial drafting and then you go back for revisions, you have to go, oh yeah. And for an example, I would say that setting a scene for me is something I always seem to forget to do in drafting. And someone like Steinbeck's really good at setting a scene. I'm like, yeah, I need to do that. I need to go and kind of lay it out for the reader. Is there something that you seem to forget in an initial draft and you go back and revision and put in?
Uh, yeah, definitely many things probably, but I I tend to write first drafts where I sort of skate along the surface. So for me, going the revision process is a lot about digging deeper, looking at the moments that where there's, you know, say the most heat, and then really trying to dig
Hmm.
into those particular scenes. And it seems like ultimately that's also about uh, layering the characters too, you know, creating more character development. But um, so I think I just get the beginning, middle, end out, and then go back and dig in.
Right. So there is a lot of humor in your book. Do you find humor to be important in fiction? And what do you think that it does for the reader?
I think it is important, and I honestly don't. I mean, I read a lot, of course, and I don't read a lot of things that have a lot of humor, which is interesting to me because I think that you know, with real people, uh, humor is often used to mask really difficult situations or discomforts. In addition to just, you know, somebody telling a joke and it being funny and you know, there being like a moment of levity. Um, but I think you know, in a book where so many difficult things happen to people, you know, some of what we learn about the characters is the way that they deal with that. And you know, Babby in particular, I think deals with some of her difficulties through humor. You know, she masks some of the emotional things that she's gone through with a certain humor. There are other characters who I think do that as well. So for me, yeah, it was really important. Although I do think of the stories as kind of sad funny or funny
Right.
sad. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. For me, I feel like humor is like subterfuge, right? Like it can disarm the reader, in a lot of ways, like a comedian would do in telling a story. Like someone like Richard Pryor, who's telling stories about addiction, but then he's, making light of it. And I saw that a lot in your stories where you were kind of deploying this kind of technique.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a really so it's a dark humor a lot of times because it is coming from a place that's, challenging situation. But yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So this book won a couple of prestigious awards. How important are awards to you in your career in writing?
Uh so far I mean, for this book, they've been really important. And the first, the Drew Hines, I honestly couldn't have been more shocked that I won that award. When they called, it was a Pennsylvania number. I remember the day, and I never answer any call that is from a number I don't know. So
Right.
they called multiple times and finally sent me an email and said, "Could you please call about your manuscript?" And I thought, "Oh God, what did I do? I left something off." Um, and then they said, "You won." And I actually said to the Jane McCafferty who runs the prize, I said, "So this is Ramona Reeves and Austin Tech." I said, "Are you sure you have the right person? I won?" She said, "Yes, you won." And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, um I was completely floored and ugly cried. Um and then my wife walked in the door about that time and I was sobbing, and she said, "What's going on?" She thought something horrible had happened, and I said, "No, no." Um, but it's been, I can't say enough about the University of Pittsburgh Press or the prize itself, or, um, which comes with a nice chunk of change, um, and and some promo money, which I think is not typical for short story collections as well.
Mm,
Um, and or the Texas Institute of Letters. That again, I mean, God, Texas has so many incredible writers.
mm,
So I just it's been important. It's also been very surprising. So
right.
that's what I'll say.
I know Sergio has a library named after him in El Paso, of all things. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. So yeah, and I got to meeting him and just meeting other people that year when I went to the award ceremony was is you know it's all dream come true kind of stuff. I mean, that's cliche, but it's true.
I
Um
know. The only way is down from here, Ramona. I'm just kidding.
hey, we don't know, but hey, it's all good. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
happy with what has happened. So it's
right.
all good.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Or do you have any writing rituals that you perform to kind of get you in the right headspace when you're sitting down at the typewriter?
Um, I I just started something kind of recently, but I try and journal before I write.
Oh,
Because
okay.
maybe because right now I'm working on a novel. So I s- I write what I think that I'm going to be working on and what I think I'm going to do. And then when I finish, I write what I did and how I feel about what I wrote. I don't know. It it does seem to help organize me a little bit. Um, but I'm just curious, I guess, to go back after I finish this thing and read and see what was there and if it was helpful. And I don't know.
That's very interesting. I have a project I'm working on where I'm journaling as the main character. I'm jotting some things down in the journal that I feel like the character would want to make a record of. He's a bartender, so I'm writing down like cocktail recipes, and he's a would-be poet, so I'm writing down like little poems, not even thinking if they're good or not, but just kind of putting myself in that headspace. So I think it's interesting that you're doing that. Now, what is it that you're journaling? Is it just notes to keep track of what you're doing? Are these personal notes or?
Yeah, it's mostly notes to keep track of what I'm doing. Um, every now and then I'll write about something else that's going on at the time that I feel like I just need to clear out of my head before I write. So that probably somebody probably think I was crazy if they read them. Here's notes about, and then some random thing, but I think that's what journals are great at doing is you know it's it's writing meditation in a way,
Mhm.
sometimes.
So I've seen you mention being in a workshop with S. Kirk Walsh, who I've spoken to on this show. She's fantastic, great writer. Can you talk about that type of community and how it helped you become a better writer, not just in her teachings, but just being a part of something like that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, Kirk's workshop is so great. And I've been in the in-person workshop before the pandemic, and then during the pandemic I actually took her workshop um online. So I've done it two different ways, but I really feel like that workshop, and then I was a part of another workshop here in Austin, a smaller one, with a group of friends. I feel like that community is so important. I mean, writing is hard. It's really hard, and especially when you get into the revision, you're really, digging into it. So having other people who are going through the same thing, and also readers, and being able to read for other people, I think all of it is very important for progressing as a writer.
Hmm.
We never get to the place where where it's like, I'm done, I've learned everything there is about being a writer. It's just always this continuous improvement, and learning. So I think it's incredibly important for support, and just learning. But and then when you have a book that comes out and that community gathers around you, I mean, that's been really touching to me, that people who have reached out and done things that I would never have asked for or imagined that would have happened. So the community is really a beautiful thing. I mean, the writing community is one of my favorite things about actually being a writer. So yeah.
Right. I was telling someone recently that when I was younger, because I started writing when I was 21 and I just turned 53. I didn't really have any writer friends, or I wasn't really part of any groups until about 6 or 7 years ago, really. And it
Mhm.
really kind of transformed how I thought about writing, because I felt so isolated before and didn't really have anyone to talk to about anything. And now I have so many writers to talk to about whether it's writing or publishing or agents or just anything, really, just what's going on in my life, and realize that these are my people. They relate to what I'm doing. Do you kind of feel that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just having people to talk to who are going through the same thing is really it's helpful. And just like you said, makes you feel like I'm not the only person spending time sitting in a room by myself for hours upon hours.
And you're like, is this weird? Am I doing
Yeah.
this wrong? And they're like, no, you're doing it right.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now's the time in the show where we do a lightning round. It is not our concept. We stole it from inside the actor's studio, but it's not their concept. They stole it from Bernard Pivot, who stole it from Marcel Proust, and on and on. So, Ramona Reeves, are you ready for the lightning round?
As ready as I'll be.
Excellent. What is your favorite word?
Yes.
What is your least favorite word?
Spreadsheet.
What turned you on?
I think a great meal with friends.
Oh, nice. What turned you off?
Mm, this is weird, but car accidents.
Okay. My sister's been in 3 in the past few years, so I get
Yeah,
that.
been a few.
What is your idea of happiness?
Reading under a blanket on a cold day.
Nice. Who is your favorite author?
I think this one was tough, but I'm gonna go with Elizabeth Strout.
All right, good choice. If you could be any character from a well-known novel throughout history, who would that be?
I decided Jordan from The Great Gatsby because I think she kind of has the life.
Right. All right. Is there a profession other than your own that you would like to attempt?
Astronomy.
Oh, interesting. Is there a
Yeah.
profession that you would least want to do?
Accounting.
All right. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the check-in desk?
I'd like her to say, "What a ride."
Nice. Ramona Reeves, everyone go out and pick up this book. It falls gently all around. Thanks for being on our show.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been a presentation of Austin Liti Limits, made possible with help from our good friends at Blue Ink Review, where typing "the end" is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.